Hi all, this is Rajiv Jung from PhD Expertise, and today we'll be talking with our special guest, Dr. Marco Rodrigues. Marco is a materials scientist at Argonne National Laboratory with extensive electrochemical energy storage experience. He finished his PhD at Rice University, an undergraduate degree in one of the top institutes in Brazil. Thank you, Marco, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited, and I was looking forward to that interview.
Oh yeah, awesome, great. So we have a full slate of questions, but we can get started at the first one, and that is, I mentioned you studied at one of the top engineering institutes in Brazil, UFMG. As a student potentially immigrating to the United States from Brazil, could you give us a quick overview of the process that you used to choose the Rice University as your school of choice?
Sure, I'll be happy to. My path, the path that took me to Rice was perhaps a little less usual than for other people, but I think there are still lessons that could be really valuable to people that are looking to get into PhD programs, especially if they're coming from other countries. What happened is after I graduated with a bachelor's in chemistry, I started doing a master's in physical chemistry on the same institution. And during that process of the master's, I got the opportunity to go to Rice University to do sort of an internship for 9 months. And so when I got to Rice, I was part of a international collaboration between my advisor back in Brazil and the person who was hosting me at Rice. And that was the first point of contact that I had with the university. And I had such a great experience there that I decided to go back to the PhD. So in the end of the day, Rice University was my only pick for a school as a PhD. And, fortunately things worked out and I went there and, I'm here today. But the point is, the reason why I chose to go back to Rice is that I've been, at that point, I had been long enough within the academic environment to know that a PhD experience can be very different depending on the group where you are at. And one thing that I had in mind is that I really valued the relationships I would have with my advisor. And so getting to know the style of the supervisor, how he operates, how he deals with people, how he organizes and structures the work, was something that I had in mind to be extremely important before I chose a place to work. And because I already had that experience, I already had that knowledge, I thought that, I would be in a place where I could be happy and I could thrive within the 4 or 5 years on a PhD. And I think that the general advice that I would give to people that are thinking about getting into a PhD program is, if you can get to a good school, that's excellent. If you can get to a group that is reputable, that's excellent. But in the end of the day, a lot of the experience you're going to have on the PhD is going to come down to how your boss really structures the group and operate, and how he handles the students, how much attention he gives to people, and how that aligns to what you're looking for. So, for example, I've met people that they really wanted to have more, one-on-one mentorship. And so going into a group where you're going to have lots of freedom to explore things by yourself would not be something that person would really be looking forward to. Whereas other people want to be able to ask more, open-ended questions and pursue things out of curiosity and see where these things are going to take them. And so working with someone that is more like a micromanager would be, really stifling to that person's creativity. And so being able to find the person that is going to offer you the conditions that you're really looking forward to in order to be able to build the work you want is really important. And there are a couple ways to do that. You can go into conferences. Is really great to get to know people. You can interact directly with the professor or with students with the professor, which is perhaps the best way to go because you can get a fresh perspective. If you cannot attend the conferences or if you can't, meet the people from the group in conferences, you can also use LinkedIn or email. If you go to the group webpage, a lot of times you're going to have email addresses from these people, or very commonly also you're going to have the names or contact information from previous students. And in my experience, going on LinkedIn and finding these people and reaching out, a lot of times they're going to be really open to talk to you. And it's actually surprising how many people they actually are open to contact, to mentor people and just be in touch for a little bit to help you orient yourself as you're starting your career and looking for people and getting to know how things work before you jump into a PhD. I think it's something that can be extremely important.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I think that in general, that's just career advice for someone, is to continue to do the research on their own and try to reach out to people. People are very nice, and you were very nice to be able to talk to us today. Exactly. So that's a classic example of that. But I wanted to get a little bit more into your experience at Rice. You talked about that, and you worked as a researcher and professor at Jayan's group. So what type of projects, even the working style, the focus on publishing, these type of things, presenting at conferences, could you talk about that? How that was like in Professor Jayan's group?
Yeah, I mean, Ajayan he is a great person, and he was a pleasure to work with. And he's very respectful to people, which is something I really appreciated. And he still has that, youthful enthusiasm and excitement when he faces good ideas, which is something that is really contagious. And that's also something that I value a lot in a leader, because, every time when you felt like you were in sort of like in the corner without any place to go, you would talk to him, and the enthusiasm would always come back. And I think that was also really important. Another thing that also made me want to go work with him is that he always gave people the openness for people to take ownership of projects. So he always encouraged people to speak up, welcome different opinions and points of view. And he also encouraged people to be leaders and of the things they are doing if they are willing to. And I think that was really important for the overall experience that I had there. And in terms of types of projects, the group is huge every single time, and you would have people looking at everything material science. You would have people, when I was there, that were trying to synthesize new materials based on various combinations of atoms to produce this single atom thick structures, and looking for electrical or magnetic properties and whatnot. You would have people looking at various components for lithium-ion batteries or other energy storage devices, and you would even have people investigating mechanical properties of these complex composite materials, or people looking at contrast agents for biological samples. So as long as you had materials playing a role in a problem, he would be extremely interested in that problem. And so, figuring out people to work with was something he really liked. And that's why the group sort of like branched into all these areas. So it was really excited to have, electrical engineers and biologists and material scientists and chemists and physicists all working together. And a lot of great work was born out of this, pot of different perspectives. And the group was also very diverse. We had people from, 11, 12 countries at any single time, lots of visitors. So it was just like a really exciting environment to be at. When I was thinking about the things that we'll be discussing today, I always try to think on advices that I could extract on these different stages of my professional life. And one thing that I learned by watching how Ajayan had conducted his career was to never be afraid of change, because at the end of the day, that can be extremely, extremely important for the professional development. And what I saw that on Ajayan's career was like this. His PhD was in microscopy, and he did some very early work on doing some very high resolution imaging of this, few atom clusters. He did like a lot of very successful and nice work out of that, and you could expect him to, continue digging into that for the foreseeable future. But a couple of years later, he was in Japan, and he was involved on this, some of the very early work on carbon nanotubes when they were discovered there. And, he had a lot of success by doing that as well. But then he didn't stop there. He, migrated into doing work on graphene and other, materials that are composed in this few or many layers of, they call atom thin structures of these different compositions. And he also did a whole bunch of work on that. And since then, I'm sure he has moved on to explore other structures, and he's going to keep evolving in the future. And I took like a very positive lesson out of that, which is, even if you don't decide to change completely your field of study like he did, there are always things that you can try to innovate on the way you were approaching problems. You could be trying different perspectives or learn new tools that can help you, answer the questions you are trying to, without relying solely on the things that you're already comfortable with, and making sure that you're always kind of like putting yourself out of your comfort zone. I think can be really refreshing, and can be really important to make sure that you keep excited about your own career.
Marco, after Rice University, you went to Argonne. You joined as a postdoc. Can you talk about why did you choose Argonne, and what were some initial projects that you worked on?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's unpack the question here. First, why Argon? I was doing research on lithium-ion batteries during my PhD in a group that was a material science group. So the general approaches that the group would have to battery science was more on a materials perspective. You're producing new materials and trying to come up with ways to improve battery technologies. But throughout the process, I actually realized that I was getting more and more excited about some of the more fundamental aspects of battery science, and I really wanted to have more hands-on experience with more hardcore aspects of that field of study. So not necessarily looking at the material side, but okay, now that I put together the battery, what else can I look at? How can I squeeze more information out of these? And so to be able to learn that in a more efficient way, I thought that the best thing that I could do was to just jump into a place where I would be surrounded by people with decades of experience thinking about these problems. And so that's why I decided to go to Argonne. But there are a couple of, different things that we can explore on that choice as well, because I actually went to Argonne first, not as a postdoc, but I went to do an internship during my PhD for 6 months. I can't really recommend enough people to go out and try things during the PhD, because having the opportunity to do internship is really invaluable, because you're going to be able to test whether or not you're going to enjoy working, professionally in the environment where you would like to be at. Argonne was a place that I thought I could enjoy working at, and I really wanted to have that experience. And the second point is that you're going to be able to get mentoring outside the circle that you would have access to generally within your PhD group, and that can also be really important. By going to Argonne during that 6 months during the internship, there was so much knowledge around me that I could learn. I'm of course exaggerating here, but it was almost like as much as I was able to learn by myself during my PhD so far. But I'm a completely different field, and so being able to expose yourself to organizations that are exploring problems that are slightly different to what you're doing before can be a great source for you to learn new things and also get some on-the-job experience to know whether or not you're going to be enjoying these things. And of course, if you have a good time and people appreciate the work you did, that's the best way for you to get at the door to figure out that job that you're looking for right after you graduate. And that's exactly what happened to me. That took me to Argonne. And now the final piece of your question is about the types of projects I was working at. Argonne works very closely with the Department of Energy. That's where a lot of the funding comes to the lab. And we have a huge battery department at Argonne with around 100 scientists working on all sorts of aspects of energy storage. And what I really liked about Argonne is that because of that connection with the Department of Energy and Department of Energy connection to companies, we sort of know the types of things that the companies are looking to learn. And we tend to work on those very aspects that could complement what the industry is doing and try to advance the industrial environment in the US. And so one of the things that I worked early on was related to fast charging of lithium-ion batteries. Because if you try to charge batteries too fast, one of the things that may happen is that you are not able to store the lithium ions as quickly as you wanted, and they will just tend to deposit on top of the electrodes as domains of metallic lithium. And when that happens, you lose charge on the battery, which is terrible, but you also make the battery less safe because lithium is very reactive. And one of the things that I was working early on actually led to us figuring out a way using a very simple technique that can be used to detect whether or not even very small amounts of that lithium plating had happened in the battery after you opened that up. And I think that was really useful and was a very exciting way to kick off my experience as a postdoc.
Yeah, speaking of your time at Argonne, we want to congratulate on your recent promotion to the staff scientist position. And
Thank you.
we would like to ask you what kind of behaviors and skills you were focused on improving during your time as a postdoc to help you secure this position.
Yeah, there are a couple of things here that I thought were really important in my experience. The first one is that I decided to learn, programming. Like I taught myself Python, and that was really great because as you start getting your hands dirty with more and more work, you have a lot of data, and by learning Python, I was able to work at much larger scales in terms of how many things I was able to handle at the same time, and I could do all of that with more speed and more depth as well. And like to the point that a couple of the works that I was able to finalize during my postdoc, they were only really possible to be performed because of those programming skills, because I had the ability that within seconds I could look at data at different angles, and if it were not for that, I wouldn't have been able to observe the real sources of the effects we were observing and trying to solve. And so that was really important to make sure that I was able to do things better, also to help me become a lot more productive as well, because you're basically making your own pace of work a lot more efficient. In addition to that, on a more perhaps less technical side of it, I think that always working on time management skills is really important, because if you are in an academic setting, and that also applies especially if you're still doing your PhD, is that it's pretty open-ended. You're sort of responsible to setting your own pace and your goals, and define what things you're going to be working at, and being able to figure out how long you take to do different things, and structure things so you can use your time efficiently without being locked inside of the lab all day long. And that takes us to the final point, which is perhaps the biggest advice I can give you in terms of professional evolution, is to get in the habit and learning how to get things done, how to be able to bring projects to completion. And the reason why that is really important is that, again, especially when we are in a PhD, a lot of times you have a lot of freedom in your hands to define how things are going to be done, and you're going to be handling different projects. There's always that danger that you're going to be juggling things, and you're going to end up having a lot of open-ended questions in your hands. But in the end of the day, whatever you do after your PhD, you're always going to be judged on the things that you're able to complete, not on all the things you had your hands on. And so in the end of the day, building up that habit of finding out what works for you to be able to keep you on focus and keeping things in check to get things done is really important. People will have different systems, and the way I found that it worked for me was always to approach things as sort of like a presentation. So as I went along and did experiments and acquired data from different sources, I would spend the time looking at them and trying to see, looking back at everything that I knew about that problem before, where that data took me on the path from where I started with the initial hypothesis and where I wanted to be. And by looking at things, if I put together a couple of slides, and I can have a very good idea about the logical path those things are taking me, and I will know exactly what I need to do next to take me to where I want to go. And I think that was really important to figure that out, so I could always keep myself in check. And by doing that, I could do, multiple projects at the same time, but always knowing where I was at the different projects. And so I could save time by not doing tangential things that were not really going to help me answer the main question. And in the end of the day, you're going to be able to build up that confidence that no matter what comes your way, you're going to be able to handle it and organize your own time to get things done.
Oh.
And I think that those are the most important things that are, I sort of like looking back at my postdoc experience, that were really important for me to, define what I want to do in the future and help me get there as well.
Our final question is, a lot of our audience are current PhD students thinking about their next moves. Many of them would like to go to academia or go to a national lab. So can you maybe you already talk about time management, learning new programming language skills. Can you maybe give one more lessons you learned on being productive postdoc?
I think I spilled a couple of advices from things that I kind of like figured looking back in my professional life so far. We talked about trying to get to know where you're going to be getting yourself at if you try to sign up for a PhD program. So do that legwork to see how the style of advisor is and how well it matches the experience you would like to have on a PhD program. We talk about not being afraid to change and also embracing this change of trying always to learn new things and aggregate new perspectives to the types of approaches you're using to solve the problems you're interested at. We talked about the importance of internships and looking for opportunities to learn things outside of your initial, circle and field of study, and also reaching out to new mentors. And also we talked about time management skills and also getting the habit and figuring out how it works out for you to get things done. That all works really well to help you professionally. But the only advice I would add to all that actually goes in the other direction, which is I think it's really important for all of us, especially if you're going to grad school, to learn how to give yourself a break. Because again, and I said that many times, grad school can be a very open-ended environment. You have all this time on your hands and you're going to be the one a lot of times dictating how that time is going to be spent. And it may appear that if you work more, you'll be more productive, but that's not always the case, because if you are well rested, if you have a fresh mind, you can see things a lot more easily than otherwise. And I think a lot of times I had to stop and try to remind myself of that throughout the years, and sometimes I still have to. And I think that trying to figure out a sort of like a support network is really important. During my PhD, I had many friends within my research group, but also outside of the research group, which is always great to make sure I'll be hanging out with people that are not going to be doing the same things that I'm doing. And so that's a great way for making sure we're not going to be talking about work. And I also, did a lot of sports at Rice University. I met a lot of grad students that were into soccer and would play a bunch of times a week. Getting yourself in a position where you're surrounded by people that are just doing things together without having to worry about work was a great way to force myself to get outside of the lab and, forget about things and relax a little bit. And that's extremely important to achieve that work-life balance. It's really important because at the end of the day, if you're rested, you can afford working less hours and still going to be a lot more productive. And stopping and looking at things with a fresher perspective, it's always really important. So that, mental health perspective is really important to keep in mind as well.
Marco, we really appreciate you being with us today. And thanks to everyone for watching this. And if you have any question for Marco, please email them to phdexpertiseteam@gmail.com. And please stay tuned for our next episode.
Thank you, everyone.